Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this presentation. My name's Michael Hill, and I work as part of the Funding Data and Financial Monitoring team. Um, Along with my colleague Charlotte, we're going to be taking you quickly through the local authority assurance collections and what we do in relation to those, and what's then done with the data that you provide to us. Any questions along the way, feel free to add them in the chat. Another one of my colleagues, Richard, will be having a look at that while I'm presenting, or at the end there will be some time for a bit of Q&A if required. So what we'll be discussing in this workshop, we'll cover what are the assurance collections, when these collections occur throughout the year, how these collections happen, who's involved in these collections, and then why we need the data, and what the data is then used for from our end. So firstly, I'm going to talk to you about the DSG statement. As you can see there, it's regulated under Section 151 of the Government Act. The Chief Finance Officers of each local authority is responsible for making the necessary arrangements for the local finance and management control. Under these arrangements, the CFO will need to ensure that the grant monies from the dedicated school grants are expended for the purposes which they're intended. This assurance statement provides an audit to document how the DSG has been deployed and whether there were any issues, for instance, fraud cases within LA maintained schools. The formal terms of the grant given by the Secretary of State under Section 16 of the Education Act 2002. Statements are uploaded to our information exchange portal, and as you can see there, it shows the deadline for last year's collection as the 5th of November. So then CFR is a framework that we use, and it provides us a template for schools to collect information in regards to their income and expenditure by each financial year, which then the maintained schools provide to the local authorities in a financial statement each year. These financial statements, they'll include school resource received in the financial year, including any unspent at the end of the previous year, the application of any resources, and the summary of the school's financial position at the end of the year. Again, this is uploaded to the collect system, and the data is used to support us with benchmarking and comparisons of schools' income and expenditure. There's also a link there to the guidance on CFR, so if anyone wants to look any further into it, they can do. So this is the typical delivery cycle for the CFR. I've used last year, so as you can see there, we open the blade the beginning of April, and then we carry out data validation on that from really whenever we receive the first return from the local authorities, and that runs up to the end of July, when we close the collect blade for the local authorities. And then we aim to upload the CFR data onto the benchmarking website and gov.uk by around the beginning of October. So this one just gives you a link there, where you can look at individual schools. You can access the data, you can look at different academic years. It gives data for the whole of England, and it shows you a spend per pupil. So you can see that and have a look about how different schools sit against other schools that have a similar demographic, etc. This is just a breakdown of the compliance that we have through the CFR. So as you can see there, we're expecting just over 12,500 every school that we were expecting submitted a return to the local authorities. Only one of those wasn't approved at local authority level, and then we couldn't authorise 5 more schools across 2 different LAs at our level. So we've authorised 12,649 school CFR returns. So as you can see here, this is the school financial benchmarking table. This is a relatively easy to use cloud-based application that we use for benchmarking schools and academies, and it uses a range of comparison algorithms. This enables quick and easy data entry, uh, easy management of school and academy data, and provides visualization of financial charts. Purpose of the school financial benchmarking tool is to provide schools with the ability to make comparisons between individual school or academy trusts spending in various categories. So these can be done then with schools that are in a similar demographic or similar size, etc. And this information can be used by school leaders to help inform with spending decisions and to identify if or where and how spending changes could be made to help support progress within available level of resource. This tool is a key element of our department's school resource management program. This, I think, came about 2017. Before that, there was 2 separate benchmarking tables, I think an LA level and an academy level. And because these 2 were separate, it wasn't easily able to compare income and expenditure of maintained schools with that of academies and vice versa. So this was created so it made it easier to be able to do those. This is a useful tool, so it's useful to sort of plug this to schools, etc., and let them aware of that if they aren't already, because it can be a useful tool for them to use. So next we're going on to section 251 budget. As you can see there, local authorities, you're required to complete this under the section 251 of the Apprenticeship Skills and Children's Learning Act. So you prepare and submit the statements of the spending and income. Yourselves publish their budget to us. Again, this is done through the collect system, and yearly is usually around the end of April. So we've just come through the end of that and the QA of that in our team recently. So as you can see, the Section 251 budget involves the collection of a very high volume of detailed data within several defined tables, with an average of about 500 cells of data across the 3 tables. And this comes from every single local authority, of which there are 151. So we receive about 76,000 items of data through this. The budget statement is intended to provide a clear picture of a local authority's planned spending. This includes local authorities intends to spend on items, as you can see there: schools budget, de-delegated items, high needs and early years, and children's and young people's services. It's important that schools forums and others can compare funding between different local authorities to have an informed debate about budget levels and use of funds. It's therefore essential that all the statements are prepared to a common format and that any data provided to us is as accurate as physically possible. We use these statements for publication of statistics, benchmarking tables for local authorities, and any parliamentary questions or requests for data information that we might receive. So as it says there, statements are used by the DfE for publication of statistics. And again, there is a link to the guidance on the section 251 on the gov.uk website. So anybody who's not familiar with that can can view that, and it will give you a little bit more of an in-depth view on what it is and what's expected. So we also do the outturn. As with the budget, section 251 is covered by the legislation that's listed on that slide there. Local authorities are expected to submit their returns normally by sort of the end of August each year. Section 251 outturn statement, it's intended to sort of provide schools, parents and others with an interest in education and services with details about schools and local authorities funding and expenditure. It can be used to inform the Treasury for monitoring purposes, and inform Parliament in its role of monitoring the Department's accountability for public funds. We can get sort of parliamentary questions or things through the viewing this data or information that we get from this data. As with the budget, the outturn is again used in relation to looking at expenditure between local authorities and different schools. They're again used by us for statistics and constructing the benchmarking tables. Ourselves in the funding data and monitoring team have overall responsibility for ensuring that the collections are delivered on time and data validation undertaken so that we have a robust data set. So some of you might recognize my name from emails that may go backwards and forwards in relation to returns that are received and us just clarifying figures, etc. So we work with numerous stakeholders, education, data division, who project manage collections, data outputs division, who write the specifications for the tables and publish the statistical releases, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on. So obviously, the better quality data that can be received, our end minimises the amount of QA and backwards and forwards that we require to do. There is only 4 members of our team, so we go through all the 151 LAs between us. So yeah, we just asked for you to submit as good and robust data as possible, and we'll look through that for you. So this here is just a view of the delivery cycle. The darker blue is the budget, and the lighter blue is the outturn. So it's a yearly cycle. The basically budget cycle starts sort of between September and January with us collating the forthcoming budget table requirements, which can include any changes or admissions to the tables from anybody internally, such as early years or funding policy unit. We also consult with LA contacts for feedback or improvement suggestions for forthcoming collections. As part of an internal consultation, we ask policy colleagues if there's any aspect of this section 251 which could be reduced, as obviously we appreciate that it's a large data collection that takes time for yourselves to complete. So we do try to minimize it down as much as we can. So we're only collecting the information that's really required by us. Then the next stage involves us developing the collect blade, following the consultations, which obviously means any additions to the collect system. We have obviously recently, I think the last couple of years, done the Excel document, which you guys can fill in and then upload as a single document onto collect and do it that way. So the collection normally goes live at the beginning of March, with LAs having towards the end of April to complete their returns. But the blade will generally stay open till around August time, which enables us to view the data, raise any validation or error issues with the representatives from each LA. Then around July time, provisional benchmarking tables are sent to LAs so they can review how the data sets will look. This also provides the LAs with a final opportunity to amend their data if anything looks um, out of the ordinary. And like I said, the blade then normally closes around the middle of August. The final stage then involves the publication of the tables via a statistical release, which goes out onto gov.uk and normally gets released around the end of September, beginning of October. The outturn follows a similar process cycle to the budget, just has a slightly different deadlines. So collect may be a system that some of you guys are familiar with. Um, so it's the Collections Online for Learning Education, Children and Teachers portal. Is used by schools, local authorities, and the Department for Education for processing data collection returns. Some of the major benefits of the portal include real-time data collection monitoring and progress reporting, the ability for the local authorities to view exactly the same information as we can see when queries arise, and being it's a website, there's no installation issues. The Collect portal is accessed via Department's secure access system. There is guidance and of how to access that on the link on that slide there. The good thing with Collect is it has built-in validation and error parameters, which will alert whoever's inputting the information if a figure is outside an expected range, and then this allows you then to put a note onto something that's called the error report, which is on Collect. So typically things like if a figure's outside a range from a previous year, it's usually about sort of 15 to 20% difference, it will flag that up, but then that gives you the option then to input a note there to tell us why that is, so then we'll not be coming back to you and chasing that figure up because we'll have the information there. As I mentioned before, for the 1920 collection, we introduced the Excel pro forma, which the LAs can populate and upload to Collect system with just a simple click of a button. We were hoping this would streamline the data collection stages for the LAs, while also making validation easier for staff our end. So next we have just some. This is just a table. One of the tables basically is just a little bit of information. As I noted earlier, the section 251 budget. It's a huge, vast data collection that sort of collates key information to enable and inform future funding allocations. So this first is just an example presented on the section 251 and contains information from SEN transport to museum and library services. So this just gives you an idea of just a few of the little bits that are involved in that. Following on from that, we have the high needs tables. So at local authority level, the section 251 provides valuable information on high needs budgets. One particular area of hospital education. The table has been a key baseline exercise for implementation of high needs national funding formula. Each year, the ESFA also allocate additional hospital education funding. This is available if, for example, there have been an increase in provisions such as a new children's ward, etc. We use this data that's included in the section 251 from LAs when we're considering requests to check and ensure that it's supported by the figures, any requests, and it is in line with the funding information that's been provided. In addition, we use information in Table 2 to compare against census and published place numbers. It's also helpful to identify the year-on-year trends, as the FA only collect changes to high needs place data from academies. The Section 251 provides a more up-to-date picture of the position in maintained PRUs and special schools. Having this data at school level has also been useful in cases relating to specific schools, which may be where a PRU converts but does not agree with the place numbers as an academy. In cases where the differences may be significant, Section 251 can enable the ESFA to identify the funded place numbers as a maintained school. ESFA can then consider this alongside other factors before deciding whether to change place numbers. So for early years, the Section 251 budget data has a number of uses. We're dependent on the LA budget data to monitor compliance against the funding policy reforms. We use the Section 251 budget data to determine supplementary funding allocations for maintained nursery schools. We can use the data to determine future supplementary funding allocations. The budget data also allows us to determine how funding for the establishments is distributed across the LAs and provider types. The average funding rate local authorities pay different early years providers, how much of the central government funding LAs retain. Budget data is also used to produce the early years funding benchmarking tool, which allows the public to see how local authorities are funding their early years providers. This is a tool that's published annually. Obviously, the better quality data that is received, the more accurate funding allocations may be implemented. And then just a brief slide on what was the SFVS, which is now the self-assessment management tool. So from 1920, the school resource management tool replaced the SFVS. The school's resource management self-assessment tool helps to provide trusts, LAs and school governors with assurance that they're meeting the basic standards necessary to achieve a good level of financial health and resource management. The school's resource management tool is a checklist which asks questions in 6 areas of resource management to provide assurance that the school is managing its resource effectively. This should be completed at school level, similar to the SFVS. The answers to these questions feed into a dashboard which shows how a school's data compares to thresholds on a range of statistics that have been identified as indicators for good resource management and outcomes. This is shown as a RAG rating against other schools of a similar demographic. So now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Charlotte, who's going to talk you through these next slides.
Cheers, Michael. So I am Charlotte Housden-Rowe. I work on the school workforce and finance statistics team. So I'm the person who's almost a customer of the data, really. My team work with some of the validation rules that Michael had mentioned earlier on. We also do our own sort of validation on our end, comparing against previous years worth of data. And then we do lots of matching up to other data sets, aggregations across the country, across regions, so that we can produce some outputs, which I think we've touched on a little bit already, but I'll go into a little bit more detail. So if we can have next slide. Talk a little bit about who plays a role. And again, I think we've kind of covered this a little bit, and there'll be some names on here that you probably will recognise. So the data that you're providing, it's based on some guidance set and goes to people who are within, so ESFA being really key. So as you all know, accountable funding, payment and financial assurance. It's ESFA who kind of set those requirements of financial reporting as well. So the sort of the detail within the financial reporting. Then we've got a data operations division as well within the DFE. So our data ops division do a lot of the technical aspects of collections. So it's not just the financial collections that we're speaking about here, but data ops also work on things like the school workforce census, which is within my team, the school census, early years census, lots of different things, attendance data, so new collection going out there as well that you might have seen published yesterday. They're all on that technical side. They're our first port of call who get the data. And then data insights and statistics division. This is where I sit. This is my team. So like I said, we undertake the data manipulation, like linking to other data sources. So for example, linking up finance data with workforce data, with pupils data, so we can have a look and see what information looks like, what financial information looks like on a per capita basis, for example. Next slide, please. So why we all need data from these collections. It takes a long time to collect up the data, as you know. It takes a long time to set up the collections. There's a lot of technical aspects that go into it. So there needs to be a really good purpose. So I just wanted to go in a little bit of why we all are interested in this data and what our requirements are. So next slide. Thank you. So we all have a responsibility to a few different service users. Now, this isn't going to be exhaustive. I'm sure you can think of some others, but some key ones that we wanted to highlight here. So we've got internal school and external schools. So your multi-academy trust CFOs, your school business leaders, your leadership team, your head teachers, your governors. And then within those external spaces, we've got people like the parents, people like learners themselves, people like ministers regularly ask us for aggregate style data. We have a transparency requirement, so we can answer requests from the media, for example. So this is just a little flavour of who we have a responsibility to and who it is that we need to answer questions for using this financial data. Next slide. Thank you. So one of the purposes of the data is about accountability and transparency, and I've very briefly touched on this. So we have a requirement to be transparent at national, local, and sort of school level with our data, so that we are accountable, so that we are transparent, so that we're not hiding information, in this circumstance here, financial based. We've got a responsibility to collect this information and then for it to go through the processes into my team, where we are outputting trustworthy, accurate and timely statistics to the public and other interested parties, like that was on the previous slide. This is part of what forms, it's called the Statistics Code of Practice. This is what I work to as a government statistician. Those words there, those little buzzwords, trustworthy, accurate and timely, they are all like the pillars that I have to work to as part of my code of practice. So this is something which underpins everything that we do with data, including this financial data. So to meet these requirements of being accountable, transparent, we have a number of different outputs, and yeah, I think we've touched on a few of these, but I'll just kind of I've pulled out some screenshots as well. So there might be some that you're really, really familiar with and some that you're less familiar with. So I'll start with the left-hand side. We've got a couple of annual official statistics. This is what my team puts out. One actually went out yesterday morning at 9:30. That was the planned expenditure, which is the bottom of the two screenshots there. This is all using your Section 251 budget data. Without the data you provide there, we cannot do that statistic. So that is one of our stats that comes out every September. And then the one that's at the top of those two screenshots is the, we call it kind of the actual expenditure within the department, just to kind of help differentiate between the two. But essentially, that's what that's one of the things that we use your Section 251 expenditure and the CFR returns for, is for that actual expenditure publication. That's every December, that one, for the previous financial year. So in this December's one, it'll be 2021-22 that we're reporting. Middle one here is compare schools performance or compare schools and college performance, CSCP. This one, it's a little bit more of a link to published stats, and it pulls through lots and lots of different data sources, so including finance data. So we pull through per capita, so per pupil spend, but then other things about workforce, about attainment, lots of information from Get Information About Schools. All of those get pulled into one place, so you can get a look at what each school looks like in terms of performance levels. On the right-hand side, schools financial benchmarking. So again, we've kind of touched on this, but I just wanted to put a screenshot in here because there's some nice data visualization aspects to SFB, which we really like to see. So my team provide a file which is based on the CFR returns. And we create a file where you can also download the data as well. So if you don't want to necessarily look at school by school, there is a way to download the underpinning data as well. So it really meets that transparency aspect. And then the bottom two here. So what we get on a pretty regular basis is a number of FOI requests, freedom of information, and parliamentary questions. Parliamentary questions or PQs, they can come in through House Commons, House of Lords, and we have a statutory requirement to answer those questions. It is very much the accountability, the transparency that we have as a department. And again, without the data that you provide, if we get asked about a certain aspect of spending or budgeting, without your data, we just can't answer it. So it's really, really important that we have that information so we can meet our requirements under accountability. Next slide, please. So this is another reason why we need data, is to help make decisions and make really effective, efficient decisions. At a local level, you have all of your information. You have your LA-based information within your Section 251s. But what we can do, the added value that we get from receiving that data, is we get to aggregate all of that information up. We get to add it all up to a regional and a national level. We can link it, like I said earlier, we can link it to other different data sources as well, so that we get that really holistic picture of what's going on in the country. We can make comparisons. We can say, you know, this location is pretty similar to this other location. It's got these type of schools. It's got these type of learners. What can we add as value by comparing? What can we do which helps people learn from each other and make these really sensible decisions with that big picture view? So to enable this, there's a few different products as well, in addition to the previous ones. So here we've got View My Financial Insights, which hopefully these will all seem really familiar as well. But we've got VMFI, where you can really click through and interrogate your local data. Same really with the SFB self-assessment dashboard. And then we've got the benchmarking report cards, all of which kind of give you lots of different parts of information and comparisons. And like I say, it's intended to give that that bigger picture view and enable good decision making and kind of help you visualize what's going on with the finance the finance situation. Next slide. I think this is my last one as well. So just a bit of a summary of what we need your data for and why it's so important to us and why we're collecting it. So I'll just run through these. So without your data, we can't meet those responsibilities of accountability and transparency, and that's both at the DFE level and also at the local level. Without the data, we can't meet those responsibilities. Without the data, we can't really compare across locations if there are biases and where we're not getting data from on a consistent basis. It means that we have big gaps in our understanding. It means that we can't make such strong conclusions from the data. Linked to that, we also can't provide our senior officials. We can't advise ministers and policy professionals and give them the information that they need to make good evidence-based decisions. We need data, we need good data to make good evidence-based decisions. Sort of looking a little bit more in the past as well, without data, we can't really assess impact. We can't say, well, a policy was implemented at this point, and here are the quantitative changes which have happened over time. We also can't understand the impact of external forces. So this will be things like, the big one, COVID. Without data underpinning that, we can't understand how external forces, such as a global pandemic, is really making a difference in a quantitative manner. I've got here about driving efficiencies. This is all linked in again with that making decisions. So having strong data makes us look at it in a big, holistic way and make really sensible decisions, which are not only efficient but effective as well. And then the last couple here is about the analysis. So performing analysis, which is all about that national, regional and local understanding for our ultimate customers, which are our learners, and the public. Without, good data in equals good data out, it's equaling good decisions out, in theory, good decisions out, it equals good visualizations, good understanding, a good amount of trust with the sector as well. So all of these strong data provisions, they feed through. It's got this really kind of ongoing long-term impact. And I think, next slide, please, Michael. And then, yeah, we've just got here a bit of further information. What I've put at the bottom too is a couple of links to the SFB, School Financial Benchmarking, but also a little plug to the Explore Education Statistics. If you've not heard of this before, it's a really big platform that we've developed over the last couple of years, where you can go in and find most of the stats which are developed by the DFE. You can go in, you can play around with data tables, you can create your own tables, you can download a whole heap of data from there if you want at national, regional, LA, and in places at school level. It's about that accountability and transparency. So we've got a lot of information there. So I just wanted to do a little plug so you can see not just the finance information we're putting out, but just the scale of information that we're able to provide based on the data that you provide us with. And that's it from me. Thanks, Michael, if you want to take it from here.
Thank you very much for attending. I hope it's been beneficial to you all. Thank you.